top stories this evening, sponsored by Courts Bringing Value Home. AFC leader condemns Venezuelan attack on GDF troops, calls for diplomatic action. What do you have to hide? PNCR leader questions government's stance on the death of ADRIANA Young. Amarindian Affairs Ministry's slothfulness in addressing land titling process must be addressed at upcoming NTCC, APA. And what's the reason for withholding the helicopter crash report? GDF says its probe has been completed. HGP Nightly News begins now. Good evening to our viewers here in Guyana and online. I'm ALETHEA Grant with the Friday, May 16, 2025 edition of the HGP Nightly News. In the news this evening, Alliance for Change leader Nigel Hughes is calling for urgent and decisive diplomatic action following what he described as a calculated attack by Venezuela on members of the Guyana Defense Force on the Guyana-Venezuela border. Hughes says the assault marks a dangerous escalation in Venezuela's aggression towards Guyana. Find out more from Tiana Cole.
Alliance for Change leader Nigel Hughes on Friday during his party's press conference condemned the most recent act of aggression by Venezuelan forces. He said the attack on ranks and officers of the Guyana Defense Force GDF while on patrol in the Iterim area represents a clear escalation in Venezuela's ongoing provocations.
This emerging pattern is clear and undeniable. It shows that a rogue state in Venezuela is waging an undeclared war against Guyana. The pattern further suggests that despite the known consequences and repercussions, Venezuela intends to stage a special military operation in the Essequibo region.
Hughes added that while Venezuela may attempt to deny involvement, the evidence leaves no room for doubt. He said this was a direct and deliberate attack by Venezuelan elements on Guyanese soldiers.
The AFC stands ready to support the fair and reasonable efforts of the government and once again demands the reconvening of the Foreign Relations Committee of the National Assembly and the Bipartisan Border and National Security Committee that previously existed.
He further emphasized the need for strong diplomatic actions. Among suggestions were the expulsion of Venezuela's ambassador to Guyana, the recall of Guyana's ambassador from Caracas, and an appeal to the United Nations Security Council for sanctions against Venezuela. Hughes said the government must show firm resolve.
The AFC awaits to be engaged in the interim and calls on all Guyanese to be vigilant, prepared, and supportive of those on the front line.
Earlier this week, members of the Guyana Defense Force came under fire while conducting routine patrol along the Indus River, which borders Venezuela border. In a statement issued early Thursday, the GDF confirmed that there were 3 separate attacks over a 24-hour period, with no reported injuries. The attacks were reportedly carried out by armed men in civilian clothing on the Venezuelan side of the border. According to the GDF, its ranks exercised a measured response on all 3 occasions. They came under fire between Iterim and Macapa. Tiana Cole reporting for the HGP Nightly News.
As dozens of persons picketed the office of the president Friday morning, leader of the opposition Aubry Norton is skeptical about government's position on the ADRIANA Young's case. What do you have to hide? Mr. Norton questions. Travis Chase reports.
Justice! Justice! Justice!
Insisting that the People's Progressive Party civic government request the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation to probe the circumstances surrounding the death of 11-year-old ADRIANA Young, supporters of the main opposition, the People's National Congress Reform, picketed the office of the president Friday morning. On the picket line was leader of the PNCR and leader of the opposition, Aubry Norton.
If you say you leave no stone unturned, how you could then come out and say, I did everything that I would have done. I don't have anything more to do. That suggests to me that he is complicit in the crime.
Already, President Irfan Ali has hinted that he has no intention of calling in the FBI to probe the child's death. Attorney General Anil Nandalal stressed that the Guyana Police Force remains the sole lawful authority for conducting investigations in the country, and that to call in the FBI to supersede the Guyana Police Force will not do well for the morale of the members of the Guyana Police Force. Opposition leader Aubry Norton is not buying the notions and believes there is more in the mortar than the pestle.
The police, more than a week after, had not taken one statement with serious police force that is looking at a crime, a crime scene, and a crime that would have occurred, and you decided that you are not going to interview anybody. It is after constant pressure.
Retired Canadian investigator Leonard Makoshin arrived in Guyana on Monday to begin working on the case. His services have already been procured by the government of Guyana. Young's family has rejected his services, citing his retired status and perceived lack of accountability to any formal organization.
We call for international investigators because the Guyana Police Force is compromised. The level of corruption at the top of the Guyana Police Force, it cannot challenge anything the government says.
An original police statement had said that Young was traced to a red and black rom, which was heading in the direction of Reading Hoop. The Guyana Police Force later acknowledged that there were inaccuracies in its original statement and the child never left the hotel.
If you as a government believe it is not a crime, then what do you have to hide? Why don't you allow a proper, thorough investigation to be undertaken?
Adriana's body was discovered by her father, Sir Brian Young, in the swimming pool of the Doubleday Hotel on April 24, approximately 20 hours after she was reported missing during a family trip at Tushin, East Bank, Essequibo. Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News.
Alliance for Change leader Nigel Hughes is calling out the Guyana Police Force for what he describes as a failure to deliver justice in the fatal shooting of a bystander in Linden. Hughes says there is sufficient evidence to lay charges, yet to date, no accountability has been shown. Find out more from Tiana Cole.
1 month after the fatal shooting of 32-year-old Keon Fajane, who was shot in the eye during a protest in Linden, Alliance for Change leader Nigel Hughes heavily criticized the Guyana Police Force for failing to charge the officer responsible.
There is video footage, and I actually accompanied an eyewitness by the name of Mr. Sulka to the Wisma police station on the night of one of the protests, and he gave a detailed statement to the police, not only recounting what took place, but identifying the officer who shot Mr. Fujane.
The AFC leader said his party is repeating its demand for the officer responsible for Fujane's death to be charged.
The fact that they've charged one police officer with the first killing is not enough. And so we repeat that request for the charge because we know the evidence exists and the evidence has been given to the Guyana Police Force. I was present when the statement was taken by the Office of Professional Responsibility.
Hughes emphasized that the continued failure to hold the officer accountable is eroding public confidence in the local law enforcement. Last month, Fajane and another man were shot during protest action in a mining town over the murder of another Lindener a day earlier. Fajane succumbed to his injuries while the other man survived. Tiana reporting for the HGP Nightly News.
More news after this break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You with the HGP Nightly News. With the National Tushaus Council Conference scheduled for next Monday, the Amarindian People's Association is insisting that issues such as the forum's format, which does not allow Indigenous leaders enough time to voice urgent concerns, and the resolution of land titling matters be addressed. Antonio Day has more.
Graham Atkinson, project coordinator at the Amerindien People's Association, is hoping that this year's National Tushau Council Conference creates a better space for Indigenous leaders to address pressing matters. Among these issues are the resolution of land titling matters in Indigenous communities such as Jawala and Chinese landing.
That the Tushaus feel empowered to continue to make these requests and demands of the government. They can't let up. These are issues that affect them, existential issues, issues of rights violations, and if they do let up, it means that keep silent. It means that they are accepting the status quo, and the status quo, as we know it, is far from what it's supposed to be.
In response to villagers' complaints about violations, Atkinson stated in an interview with Nightly News that the AP was open to collaborating with the government on ways to resolve problems pertaining to the Amarindian land titling project. He posited that the Ministry of Amarindian Affairs, led by Minister Pauline Sukai, for whatsoever reason, has been unwilling to work with the APA in addressing these issues.
Indigenous people's lands, I think the land demarcation process is very slow. We have the ALETHEA project that has not been turning out the required results that it's supposed to be.
It is anticipated that titling and demarcation will enhance land tenure security and the growth of Amarindians' asset base, allowing for better long-term planning for their future development. The Amarindian Land Titling ALT project aims to empower Amarindians to safeguard their lands and natural resources with an eye towards sustainable social and economic development.
And this is because government is in control of the demarcation processes, but there is no great hurry or even efficiency in getting to the point where Indigenous people's lands.
The APA representative also discussed other topics that need to be the focus of the Tushaus Conference, like the amendment to the Amerindian Act of 2006. He believes this has been on the back burner for too long.
There were glaring gaps which were highlighted then, but the Act also has good parts, but there are certain parts that lack the respect for Indigenous people's rights, and so that's where we wanted it to be, the changes to be.
I'm Antonio Day reporting for the HGP Nightly News.
Meanwhile, Laura George, an Indigenous rights activist and Alliance for Change member, is worried about the safeguards in place to protect the people who live near the Venezuelan borders. George's growing concerns come in light of recent attacks by Venezuelan military forces on members of the Ghana Defense Force. Antonio Day has that story.
Many citizens are apprehensive after Venezuela's most recent military attacks on Ghana Defense Force ranks, as the country moves forward with its planned elections to annex Ghana's Essequibo. Alliance for Change member and Indigenous rights activist Laura George is pleading with the state to establish backup plans for citizens of communities like Arau, Kaikan, and Iterengbang, which are close to the Venezuelan border in the event of attacks.
Guyana has to address how do we deal with these persons who live on the Venezuela shore, who might very well be under pressure to vote along with Venezuela, under pressure and perhaps intimidated or threatened by the Venezuelan army.
The International Court of Justice ICJ granted Ghana's request for a temporary injunction against Venezuela's declared intention to hold elections in Essequibo. Given the large number of Venezuelan men in military uniforms moving through communities, she suggested that the government hold a meeting with the populace to discuss the security measures that will be implemented.
And we're also very much aware of the lack of effective protection and services that we've given prior, during incidents that have affected our army personnel.
George, in response to questions posed by Nightly News, debriefed on a recent occurrence in Arau.
Like last week, Thursday, the residents of Arau and Kaikan and those places couldn't sleep because they reported that there were 3 boatloads of army personnel that had at least 40 in each boat, Venezuelan soldiers. They further learned that it was a change of the guard that takes place, from time to time.
The AFC executive also touched on her expectations of the National Two-Shows Council conference slated for Monday.
The practicality of the NTC conference has been it has not yielded response to policy, legislative, and program and other areas there. So that's why we continue to have Jawala's situation.
She said that every two-show conference, the government picks and chooses what matters should be addressed, which restricts Indigenous leaders from effectively addressing grave matters. In this context, George stated that considering the ongoing conflict between Venezuela and Guyana, two-shows should be apprised on what measures the state will take to effectively protect its citizens.
It wastes the time of the two-shows and the communities, is disrespectful to them, because we're trying to make them feel that it's being addressed.
I'm Antonio Day reporting for the HGP Nightly News.
Thank you, Antonio. More news on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching the HGP Nightly News. 4 men were today charged with 9 counts of robbery on their arms, committed on 7 Guyanese and 2 Guyanese of Chinese descent. The men are Jacob Fable, male, Guyanese of African descent, age 58 years, a fisherman of Paramaribo, Suriname, and Manchester Village, Quarantine. Andre Crandon, called Gunman, male, Guyanese of African descent, age 38 years, a laborer of Lot 151, Little India, Cariveton. Joshua Smith, called Bias, male, Guyanese of African descent, age 30 years, a construction worker of Lot 47, Liverpool Village, Quarantine. And Fitzroy Joseph, called Mansell, male, Guyanese of African descent, age 27 years, a hire car driver of number 77 Housing Scheme, Cariveton, Berbice. They were arrested on the 13th and 14th of May by detectives in Berbice. According to the police, the 9 persons were robbed of close to $5.5 million in cash, cell phones, a motor car, a gold ring, earring, a bangle, SIM cards, and several bank cards. They all appeared at the Springlands Magistrates Court on May 16, 2025 via Zoom, where the indictable charges were read to them. They were not required to plea. Bail was refused and the matter was postponed to June 11, 2025. It remains unclear why the government has opted not to release the findings of that helicopter crash that claimed the lives of 5 servicemen. The Guyana Defense Force has confirmed that its internal investigation has been completed. Travis Chase reports.
The Guyana Defense Force had established a board of inquiry into the deadly December 2023 helicopter crash that killed 5 members of the military. 14 months after that investigation, Chief of Defense Staff of the Guyana Defense Force, Brigadier Omar Khan, could not say when the findings of that investigation will be released.
So the Board of Inquiry is meant to have that report when it's completed. We did what we had to do. But there's a part in which we have to have from the official report to take into consideration to complete our Board of Inquiry.
Nightly News understands that investigations by the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority and the Guyana Defense Force have been completed, but the reason for withholding the report remains a mystery.
All the recommendations, all the findings of our internal investigation have been acted upon.
What were those findings?
I will make that available when the official report comes out.
Minister of Public Works Juan Edgel, who has aviation oversight, had stated in early January of this year that the draft report into the deadly helicopter crash was awaiting comments from the various stakeholders and that they have until January 10, 2025 to do so. More than 70 days have passed since the last deadline given by Minister Edgel.
The helicopter investigation, we were a stakeholder in that investigation. By the nature of Guyana's law, the Ministry of Public Works has that mandate to direct an investigative body to investigate that incident.
The crash had claimed the lives of Brigadier Gary Beaton, Colonel Michael Shuhul, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Charles, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Welcome, and Staff Sergeant Jason Khan. The two survivors were Lieutenant Andy Crawford and Corporal Dwayne Jackson. The incident occurred about 30 miles east of Arau, near the Venezuelan border. Travis Chase, HGP Nightly News.
Stay tuned for regional news.
Good evening and welcome to Friday's edition of the Regional News. We begin with news in the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Defense Minister Wayne Sturge has ordered that itinerary of Jamaican dancehall artist Vybz Kartel to be cut. In one of his first acts of business, Sturge, according to a legal source within the ministry, is prohibiting Vybz Kartel from 2 media interviews and other events. The artist born Adidja Palma is scheduled to arrive in the country on May 26 in preparation for his concert on May 31. According to immigration order, Sturge blanked Palma for a morning radio interview, a midday television appearance, and a local press drop-in on May 27. He's also blocked a meet and greet, a visit to a school or youth center, a cultural launch with the community leaders, and an official meet and greet on May 28. Turning attention to news in Latin America, police in Colombia have arrested a man suspected of being involved in the killing of 13 kidnapped workers at a gold mine in neighboring Peru. Miguel Antonio Rodriguez Diaz, whose alias is Cochillo, was arrested in the city of Medellin in a joint operation between the two countries, and Interpol, according to Peru's Interior Ministry and Colombian police. The bodies of the miners were recovered on the 4th of May from a tunnel at a mine in Patas, district of Peru. A lawyer for Mr. Diaz has denied his involvement in the killings. The 13 men killed in Patas had been sent to confront a group which had attacked and occupied the mine, but were ambushed and seized as they were trying to regain control of it, Peruvian authorities said. Mr. Diaz is suspected of allegedly ordering the storming of the mine's entrance with the aim of stealing gold extracted by miners, Peru's Interior Ministry said in a statement. And we end with interesting news in India. India is considering plans to dramatically increase the water it draws from a major river that feeds Pakistani farms downstream as part of retaliatory action for a deadly April attack on tourists that New Delhi blames on Islamabad, according to 4 people familiar with the matter. Delhi, quote-unquote, put in abeyance its participation in the Indus Waters Treaty of 1960, which governs usage of the Indus River system, shortly after 26 civilians in Indian Kashmir were killed in what India called an act of terror. Pakistan has denied involvement in the incident, but the accord has not been revived despite the 2 nuclear-armed neighbors agreeing on a ceasefire last week, following the worst fighting between them in decades. Thank you for watching. I'm Antonio Day.
AFC leader condemns Venezuelan attack on GDF troops, calls for diplomatic action. What do you have to hide? PNCR leader questions government's stance on the death of ADRIANA Young. Amarindian Affairs Ministry's slothfulness in addressing land titling process must be addressed at the upcoming NTCC, APA. And what's the reason for withholding the helicopter crash report? GDF says its probe has been completed. Those are our major headlines. For these stories and more, please go to our website. It's www.hgptv.com. I'm ALETHEA Grant. Thanks for watching.